It seems that nowadays most media we're being subjected to has the tendency to fluctuate when it comes to the quality between installments. We've seen large dips in infamous cases such as Game of Thrones or The Witcher, where everything went off the rails in a blink of an eye, but we've also witnessed huge spikes on the opposite end of the spectrum with installments like Puss in Boots and The Last Wish, where the level of quality surged unexpectedly out of the stratosphere, kind of like Bitcoin. But since the topic of discussion for today's video is a TV show, let's stick to this medium. I still remember watching The Walking Dead for the first time, and I remember the feeling of comfortability the show would give me, because every week I knew I was getting more shenanigans with the same cast of characters I love. And also Andrea. I'm also using the word comfortability loosely here because this show loved taking the wind out of me after killing off all my beloved characters. Despite all of this, I would still get excited to catch the newest episode every week because after a couple of seasons, it practically became my routine. Even though the original group of survivors had been replaced gradually with new characters, or the pacing started feeling a bit too slow at times, this feeling of comfortability was still keeping me invested in an ever so changing universe. And that was all due to consistency. You can talk all the shit that you want about The Walking Dead, and the show deserves its fair share of criticism, but you cannot call it inconsistent when it comes to the first 4 to 5 seasons at least. There are small dips in the quality here and there, sure, like the pacing in season 2, but at the end of the day, the showrunners knew what the people wanted and they were not shy of keeping this winning formula going. Every week you would tune in to see zombies eating people, Rick dropping unnominated monologues, justice for Andrew Lincoln,
I'm sweating,
Daryl shooting his crossbow, and of course Coral. They would spicy up the scenery or the walker killing, but the show remained consistent at delivering exactly what the people wanted. And I think that's a substantial part of The Walking Dead's rise in popularity. It's consistency. And I'm also glad that this term has not been forgotten and is still alive and well in one of my favorite ongoing shows, The Bear. Damn, I thought this was going to be a The Walking Dead video for a second. I want to touch upon how this piece of art is a breath of fresh air when it comes to keeping its delivery consistent, and how this aspect has also managed to highlight some dissatisfied voices who might have been influenced by the modern dopamine rush focused media. That was a word salad, wasn't it? So let's start simple. What is consistency? Well, ChatGPT says that consistency is nah, get the fuck out of here. You really thought I was going to create a baseline grounded in an AI generated definition? Please, this YouTube channel still has standards. Now please like and subscribe to support passion driven content. Anyway, consistency is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. Or was that insanity? Nah, but for real, when I'm thinking about consistency, I'm thinking about dedication combined with repetition. And The Bear does both of these things very well. The newest season just dropped and reminded me that it is okay to stand in the same place and do the same thing over and over again as long as love is part of the equation. I mean, just look at me trying to pursue my dream of content creation after this medium has been oversaturated to death and originality has become less and less the center of attention. But enough about me, let's talk about the bear in the room. I'm not going to go into spoilers because I don't need them to illustrate my point, and also nothing drastic has happened, which I like, and it's actually my point. Remember the feeling of comfortability I was highlighting earlier whilst talking about The Walking Dead? Well, I get the same thing watching The Bear. Every year after a new season drops, I'm delighted to revisit this cast of characters who I adore, and once again, I'm using the term comfortability very loosely here because holy shit, this show feels like a panic attack a lot of the time. Therefore, in spite of the anxiety-inducing editing and dialogue, the show manages to create this sense of comfortability through two key elements. The first one is the tone of the show. It has been already established that it is very ironic that this series keeps winning Emmy after Emmy for Best Comedy when there are not that many ongoing shows that can induce an anxiety attack such as this one. That being said, I would not classify it any other way. The Bear is absolutely hilarious. From the over-sarcastic nature of the dialogue to the comedic timing of unfortunate events, the show manages to create and curate such a refined capsule of dark humor that you cannot help yourself but laugh at the misery these poor characters get put through. And the facts. don't forget about the facts. This is a show which is set up on the suicide of Carmi's brother Mikey, who was suffering from addiction. That is a very dark baseline. However, most scenes in which we can actually get to see Mikey tend to focus on the positive notes of his character. You see the joy he brought into people's lives and how fun he was as a person. Yeah, you get sad because you know what's his unfortunate fate, but the comedic writing always pulls you back in by making you laugh. You get comfortable when you laugh. I don't want to dive deep into the themes and motives of this show because I would want to do a proper essay about the entire series when it eventually wraps up, but the comedic tone emphasizes every emotional moment, whether it's tender or it's cruel. This entire back and forth between depression and dick jokes could have been a completely incoherent mess if it weren't for the consistent tone that holds everything together. When the foundation of your building is strong and stable, you can afford to experiment with different types of materials or creative design choices because you know that the final vision will be supported by your groundwork. If your foundation is flimsy, your structure will fall apart as soon as the wind blows into a different direction. Consistency is what creates a strong foundation, and The Bear perfected this aspect throughout the first 3 seasons by always focusing on the comedic core of the show juxtaposed to all the gloom. And season 4 doesn't change course one bit as it continues to deliver the same dark humor the fanbase is used to. By keeping the tone consistent, The Bear is able to explore as much or as little as possible when it comes to its characters and world, because the table has already been set and everyone remains seated. Damn, I made a restaurant innuendo without even realizing it, that's sick. Now the second key element that plays a big part into creating this feeling of comfortability is growth. To be specific, the growth each character goes through. The cast of The Bear closely resembles one of a sitcom because it is a tight group of people and the sole focus of the show is to highlight the interpersonal relationships between these characters. On one hand, food and the restaurant business plays a big part in making The Bear stand out with its focus on small details and tense moments. However, that's not where the heart of the show lies. You don't watch The Office to immerse yourself in a corporate job, you watch it to see how this group of co-workers evolves and starts resembling a family. Going back to my The Walking Dead parallel, you don't even watch the zombie show for the zombies. After a couple of episodes, your attention gravitates towards the tense dynamic of this group of unusual people whose goal is purely survival. Well, The Bear follows this pattern. Watching these characters go from constantly screaming at each other out of spite to screaming at each other out of love is nothing short of heartwarming. You can create a parallel for each member of the cast, comparing their season 1 version to their season 4 counterpart, and you can see the surreal growth I'm referring to. Because this growth happens gradually, or actually let me use the trigger word for today's video, consistently, you get invested into the evolution of these characters. And through this consistent growth, you get the strong core of the show. You start to witness small gestures which convey compassion. People stop interrupting each other and actually let the other person finish their sentence before speaking. You see these types of shifts in the behavior of these characters if you pay close attention to the minute details, but the growth is also pretty obvious on a macro level. People actually learn from their mistakes and reference events from 2 seasons ago, addressing that they have changed. There are substantial consequences for both positive and negative events. You get comfortable because you observe flawed individuals put aside their differences and work hard to become a unit. At the end of the day, this show is basically hopecore. Consistency plays a big part into shifting the narrative from a hopeless conflict of interest to an anime training arc focused on the power of friendship. As soon as I started season 4, I felt like I actually never left the kitchen of The Bear. I was reunited with these wonderful cooks who I've seen grow, and as cringy as it sounds, I felt like I was welcome back. Having spent so much time inside the restaurant, I was already familiar with the anxiety-inducing atmosphere or the explosive temper of Carmi and Richie, caused by unresolved family drama. I basically knew what to expect, and after finishing the season, I can attest that I was not surprised by anything thrown into the mix. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the only problem of consistency. When you're doing the same thing over and over again, you eventually get to the point of mastering the thing in question, resulting in a monotone repetition which lacks the element of surprise. Don't get me wrong, consistency is a good thing, but it can take away the excitement out of the entire equation. How many one-night stands can you have until you've ran through all personality types of chicks? How many zombies can you kill until you realize that they actually don't even pose a threat anymore? And in our case, how many problems can arise in the process of repairing a failing business until you accept that stability will never be part of the routine? Or how many arguments can you have with your dysfunctional family until you've said everything you had to say multiple times? Season 4 of The Bear has reached peak consistency because across all 10 episodes, you're not thrown a singular curveball that you didn't expect, and every interaction goes as well as you thought it would go. I'm not even being sarcastic. I talked about the consistent growth each character goes through, and at this point it would be really shocking if these people started hating each other all over again. You see them having healthy conversations and it feels amazing. Don't get me wrong, it helps the feeling of comfortability, but that feeling is a double-edged sword because at the end of the day, it's nothing new. Like I said before, I won't be going into spoilers, but season 4 feels the same as season 3, but ironically in all the best possible ways. The restaurant is still on the verge of shutting down and the crew is still trying out new things to help the business thrive. Nothing new so far. The Berzato family drama goes on and the season is structured to purposely focus more on their conflicts and resolutions rather than the other employees. Still nothing new. This is by far the most personal season so far because it goes all in on exploring these relationships through significant progress because the show is starting to realize you can't drag this forever. Matter of fact, this show has become way too self-aware at this point in the story because it presents all of the things I've drawn attention to as core elements of the season. The idea to focus this video on consistency is not mine. This is literally the main theme of the fucking season. The Bear is self-aware that it reached that level of consistency and cannot surprise its viewers anymore, but it fully embraces this aspect and has its way with it. The characters point out how the restaurant's performance has been stagnating. All of the conflicts that were left open-ended by the end of the previous season have a compelling conclusion that doesn't pull the rug under your feet, because a simple resolution that makes sense is always better than subverting expectations. You hear that, Game of Thrones? The characters act as if they have gone through a continuous evolution and don't pull any sudden 180 to undermine the entire consistent growth. Everything is predictable, the show knows it, it doesn't care, and it all works because of that. This entire season is summed up to pure entertainment, good writing, and compelling conversations from the beginning to the end. The show truly becomes meta at one point because it makes a big point out of the positive implications of hiring multiple new employees, when the show practically does the same thing by allocating more budget for us to get more screen time with these wonderful expensive actors that I don't know how the show can afford. It's because everything is kept really neat and tidy, centered around a couple of well-written plot points instead of bloated storylines, duh. That being said, I get why some people would get bored with this consistency. Compared to the first 2 seasons of the show, the reviews have gotten lower, and I believe it is due to this complacent place the show found itself in for a second, even if it is intentional to a certain point. I started this video by mentioning how modern media tends to fluctuate drastically in terms of quality. Directors and showrunners tend to either experiment and risk to mess up the entire flow of their product, or they get lazy and deliver half-assed shit in order to prioritize profit over passion. I believe consistency falls right down the middle on this chart because it prioritizes perfecting the winning formula whilst limiting the excitement factor. The Bear strongly resembles an old school TV show that you would casually watch every weekend after a stressful work week. Too bad the show follows the binge formula and drops all episodes at once, meaning that I will obviously watch all of it in one day because I have an addictive personality, only to feel empty for an entire year after. If you've never seen The Bear, I would strongly advise that you give it a try, and if it doesn't stick, you can easily drop off at any point, unlike Love Island. It's casual, compelling TV at its finest. Nothing too bombastic to match the hype of going to the cinema, but definitely not something to put as background noise whilst doing chores or other shit. Me personally, I fucking love The Bear. It is slowly becoming one of my favorite TV shows ever because it blends humor and drama perfectly in a way that only masterpieces like BoJack Horseman managed to achieve. I appreciate the consistency achieved by the series because I can focus on enjoying my time with the show instead of constantly shifting through emotions. But I understand why some people would shift their perspective to boredom as the quality is starting to resemble a plateau instead of a never-ending climb. That, and because modern media rotted our minds to the point that we need to be stimulated at all times. I thought this would be a good idea for a video because I wanted to explore this notion of consistency and in this process see how other people view it and its contradictory effects on the viewer. So please feel free to leave a comment. I also wanted an excuse to talk about The Bear, sue me, because as I said, I fucking love it. Feel free to leave a comment about your experience with The Bear also. How did you find the latest season? The self-awareness the show brings to its consistency quote-unquote problem only indicates that there are probably not that many seasons left in the program, as season 4 shifted most storylines towards a possible conclusion. On one hand, I'm sad because I don't want to lose this feeling of comfortability I was yapping during the entire duration of this video. But on the other hand, I truly believe in the philosophy that all good things must end when they are still good. So I want The Bear to go out in a blaze of glory and not drag itself out until fucking Gordon Ramsay makes a cameo. Until that day, thank you for staying with me until the end. Your presence has been priceless. Take care. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I was playing Dave the Diver all this time. Anyway, see ya.